Why do assets and features that have stood in place for years within a game break? Why do they need to be replaced, even if they work fine? And why do handcrafted assets often get replaced with more generic cookie-cutter replacements? Let's break it down. Today we'll be dumpster diving into the world of technical debt. Okay, so what is technical debt? What does it mean for a live game? A simplified way of looking at technical debt is it's what accumulates when you build something with tools and knowledge and the constraints of today, and then keep adding new systems on top without rebuilding that foundation. Building a skyscraper's 30th floor before the load-bearing columns are ready. In a game as ambitious and long-running as Star Citizen, built over time with layers of systems, artwork, mechanics, engine modifications and code, it can be found almost anywhere in 3D meshes, shaders, setups, entity hierarchy, item port definitions, UV maps, collisions, geometry, and all the logic that tells the server what a given object is and what it's allowed to do. First up, a bit of history and some technical jargon. Star Citizen began its life on CryEngine 3, a powerful game engine for its time, designed primarily around corridor-style FPS environments and single-player games. Chris Roberts chose CryEngine because its DNA felt like PC gaming, and for its reputation for the clarity and the fidelity needed for a project like Star Citizen. With the team and limitations of crowdfunded startup, not having to build a 3D engine from scratch should have meant more time spent making the actual game. However, this choice of engine and scale ultimately meant every asset built in those early years was shaped by CryEngine's limitations. How it handles materials, how it defines collision meshes, how it thinks about levels of detail, and how it breaks the world down into chunks that your CPU can reason about and handle. Even with a pre-existing game engine, CIG still found itself rewriting large portions of the engine's tools and features to better support the multiplayer experience and open world, including rendering, network, persistence, simulation technologies, the move from 32-bit to 64-bit, evolving into what we eventually called Star Engine, which can no longer be accurately described as any specific version of the base CryEngine or even its successor, Lumberyard, the latter of two, which was responsible for the development of Amazon Studios' New World MMO. Now, as impressive as this level of evolution is, it creates a canyon worth of a difference between systems being written now and the geometry and logic that were authored over a decade ago. So how does an asset become old or require a rework? When artists built Port Olisar, for example, it was revealed to the world in the mid-2010s. The game's development beyond the basic tech demo was still in flux, to say the least. The geometry was authored in whatever 3D package CIG was using at the time, which was typically Maya or 3ds Max, then exported to CryEngine's native formats of CFG or CGA. Assigned materials using CryEngine's older pre-PBR physical-based rendering pipeline, PBR didn't really become a standard until years later, and assets built before or during that transition period often had materials that were fundamentally incompatible with modern lighting systems, RTX and the such, without full or manual reworks, that is. Modern PBR shaders model how light physically interacts with the surface, for example, its roughness, metalness, any subsurface scattering, with the goal of achieving a closer to real aesthetic at a lower processing cost. Older CryEngine materials often used hand-painted or specular maps and diffuse textures that approximated this without truly conforming to it. When a newer rendering pass or lighting model is introduced, those old materials can look wrong, perform inconsistently, or require workarounds that add GPU and CPU overhead. Star Citizen's LOD system often changes based on polygon density to ensure consistent appearance, less artist intervention, and promotes optimal art assets with fewer sub-pixel polygons. An older asset built to different density assumptions simply doesn't integrate cleanly with it, and it'll either look out of place or it'll perform badly at different ranges, or require custom LOD models that other more modern assets just simply wouldn't need. Layered on top of that is the entity hierarchy and item port system. Every object that is in Star Citizen is defined as an entity with a set of item ports. These describe what can be attached to it and how it interacts. These definitions tell the game engine and server what to simulate, and in the case of an early state space station, such as Port Olisar, it was built when the system was still rudimentary. It had no cargo deck, no hospital module, no docking ports for larger player ships, and as the game grew outward, the implementation of newer prefabricated station tech came on board. Port Olisar was left as the only space station without these features, and as the location aged, This was reflected in the limitations of the entity system. Bolting those features on later would simply require essentially rebuilding the station's item port hierarchy from scratch, which at the scale of a station is indistinguishable from rebuilding the asset. Let's take a look at this with two examples of technical debt and how it was handled by CIG in-game. For these I'm going to use assets primarily as it's easier to visualize. So then let's take a look at Port Olisar and the Idris. Ask any veteran player where their Star Citizen story really began. The answer is almost always Port Olisar. It was there from Alpha 2.0 in December 2015, the first real persistent space station players could exist in, look out from and call a waypoint or home. It's 4 struts labelled A through D, always in the way when you discover that your friends are on the opposite side of the station and having to run out the airlock and EVA over to their pad, discovering all too late that you forgot your helmet despite all the warning signs. Feel free to put an F in the comment section below if that was you. It's a signature silhouette hanging above Crusader's clouds that became a muscle memory for an entire generation of backers because we are that old. Its distinctive ring shape and stunning views of the gas giant Crusader made it a favourite spot for screenshots and cinematic videos. There was something almost meditative about logging into the verse and finding yourself there, looking down at the swirling atmosphere below. The scale felt right, the proportions were intimate without being small enough that intimacy felt homely. But it's the intimacy that was also its fatal flaw. While beloved by many, it was old and outdated, on top of being too small to contain all the gameplay and features a space station of its size required in today's game, having no hospital or cargo sections. Slowly, as CIG added new systems to the game, exposed Port Olisar's more foundational constraints more starkly. When physicalized cargo arrived, there was nowhere to put it. When the medical system expanded, there was no facility to support it. When refueling mechanics arrived, the station couldn't accommodate them. Each patch was essentially a negotiation with a structure that was never designed to evolve in that way. In the year 2953, in-universe, it was decommissioned and replaced by Seraphim Station, a more ample entry port with cargo installations to accommodate the trade from and to Crusader. The new station is 4 to 5 times larger than its predecessor, and it comes with all the amenities required to support all current gameplay loops, on top of room for expansion. CIG even honoured the loss of Port Olisar, and to commemorate its legacy, the developers offered players a chance to earn a special Spectrum badge by visiting the station before it was removed, along with a pretty funny video courtesy of Jared Disco Huckabee, providing an opportunity for both veteran and new players to pay their respects and capture final memories of this historic location. It was seen as an unusual and genuinely thoughtful gesture by CIG, for a live game service anyway, and an acknowledgement of the community's emotional investment, even if the asset itself still had to go. Speaking from speculation, could it return? From a technical point of view, yes, in some form. It would need a dedicated team, however, as it would incorporate both prefab spaces and the item port system, but also those handcrafted entry areas and locations we all miss so much. A scale model of Port Olisar made by a community group was shown at the 2024 CitizenCon, demonstrating that nostalgia hasn't faded. But a literal return to the persistent universe in its original state is essentially impossible, without rebuilding it entirely, which defeats the purpose. Maybe we could get some kind of space museum. Olisar was retired due to its age and inability to change to the new systems needed, and in doing so we lost something great. I'm not just talking about its physical geometry, but the tangible handcrafted feel of an early era location, built by a smaller team with fewer constraints and a more creative latitude. These old locations had a character that is genuinely hard to reproduce once you've moved to building at scale with standardized modular kits and production pipelines. Seraphim Station is better by every measurable metric. It's big and efficient, expandable and capable of much more than its predecessor, but it doesn't feel like it's somewhere you could lay your hat at the end of the day. Olisar finally met its end to prevent issues going forward, with a proactive attempt to correct the ship before it causes more problems. So if Olisar is the story of debt handled proactively, the Aegis Idris is the story of what happens when you don't get there fast enough. The Idris-class frigate is one of Star Citizen's most iconic and complex capital ships, a massive multi-crew vessel with hangar bays, full crew complement, turrets, and enough internal real estate to feel like a self-contained environment. It's also one of the oldest large ship assets in the game, with a design and entity structure that predates many of the systems it now has to interact with. In June 2026, the Aegis Idris was temporarily filtered out of the ASOP terminals, while the team investigated elevated error rates leading to server instability and crashes. Boiling the issue down, a new mechanic or update which interacts with the Idris's entity hierarchy, something in the way that hand shook between the old asset definition and the new server-side logic broke catastrophically. This resulted in a cascade failure, causing any server where the Idris was spawned to eventually crash. Because Star Citizen runs on shared persistent simulation, where entities are tracked globally across server meshes, one badly behaved entity definition can generate an error rate spike that affects every player on that shard. In 4.8, the Idris P also exhibited broken shield behavior. Laser weapons passed straight through its shields, with the sole exception of the Panther repeaters for some reason. Turrets on the Idris were also found to disassemble themselves into components after being equipped and then unequipped, a clear sign that the item port system on the old asset is not correctly communicating with the newer component attachment logics. These aren't your typical bugs in a traditional sense, when all these new game mechanics, which are written against modern entities and component assumptions, and then they try to talk to older assets, one built without those assumptions in mind. If the translation is not correct, the result is an undefined behavior, errors and crashes, essentially. Sometimes it's a visual glitch, sometimes it's the turrets falling apart, and sometimes it's the entire server going down. The word CIG engineers apparently used when restoring the Idris access was that of percussive maintenance, a term which means the fix involved forceful, blunt instrument intervention rather than a clean tool solution. That phrase tells us everything about the nature of the technical debt involved. You can fix the immediate problem, but the underlying mismatch is still there, waiting for the next new mechanic to trip over it. So why can't we just patch our way out? The intuitive response is to why not just fix the old assets? The answer is, at a certain age and complexity, fixing means rebuilding or replacing. In my day job, I'm an IT guy, a senior workshop technician. I fix PCs and technology when they break beyond restore points. I'm a hardware specialist, basically. We often see older PCs come in and that no matter how well they're currently working, so they simply can't be updated. They won't fit new components, and while money can be spent working around most shortcomings, we often have to ask our customers, is it worth it? All the while trying to navigate their sunk cost fallacy driven by their nostalgia of the thing and their emotional attachment to it. In most cases, we're just putting band-aids on broken legs. The problem remains, even if we alleviate some of the minor symptoms. In a game, you simply can't re-export an old mesh in a new format and have modern systems understand it correctly. The geometry has to be reauthored, needs to be set up for the new LOD systems. The materials need to be rebuilt in PBR. The entity hierarchy has to be redesigned to match current item port specifications. The collision geometry, which the physics engine and the server both use to identify or interact with the object, all need to match new standards for accuracy and performance. For something as large as an Idris, it's effectively a full ship rework. It's months of artist time, engineering integration, QA, and then the inevitable second round of bugs as the newly rebuilt version encounters things the old one never did. Meanwhile, the game keeps moving forward, and every sprint brings new mechanics, new server systems, new rendering features. An asset rework that starts today has to hit a moving target, as in it has to be designed not just against what the game is now, but where it's going to be in the future. This is the core cruelty of technical debt in a live service development. The cost of paying it down rises in proportion to how long you let it accumulate, and the urgency to pay it down also rises in proportion to how ambitious your systems are. Star Citizen is one of the most ambitious games ever made, which means its technical debt problem is correspondingly severe. Ultimately, this is why we lose, but why it's still worth it. Every time a legacy asset gets replaced, something genuine is lost. The original Port Olisar had handcrafted specificity, yet intimacy in its scale. That accumulated meaning precisely because it was the same place players have returned to for all those years. New stations are built for modularity, reusable components that tile efficiently across multiple locations, architecturally sound and operationally sensible, but it produces environments that, however polished, don't carry the same fingerprint. The old Stanton stations had quirks. Port Olisar's pads were arranged in a way that created natural choke points. Its corridors forced interaction. Its size made it comprehensible in a way that Seraphim, despite its beauty and complexity, simply cannot be. That's gone. It's correctly gone. Seraphim does more, performs better, and supports more gameplay, but has lost its distinct identity, which many players do feel, and are not wrong for feeling it. The consolation prize in all this is that every time CIG replaces a legacy asset with one built to current standards, it does expand the ceiling of what the new mechanics can do. The new Stanton stations support cargo elevators, hospital gameplay, docking systems, persistent inventory, and whatever comes after that. Port Olisar could support none of those things without a rebuild that would have taken longer than building Seraphim from scratch. The Idris, when it eventually receives a full rework, will likely support mechanics that don't even exist yet, because it's built to a platform at that point and not just for now. You could say that the real argument for recycling our old tech, not that the new is always more beautiful, but that the old becomes a limitation on what the future of a game like Star Citizen can be. Persistent, evolving universe with escalating fidelity, and due to its complexity, limitations cannot be carried forever. The backers who funded the project didn't pay for Star Citizen as it was in 2015. Well, I mean, most of us at least. They paid for what it's becoming. Keeping Port Olisar or any older tech or assets in perpetuity would have certainly been a kindness to nostalgia, but a betrayal of the development of the game's ambition. The debt would pile up, more and more things would fall down. What's amazing is we get to see it. So many games announce, go quiet, and launch without us ever seeing the in-between, the broken yet fascinating. The verse moves forward, the debt gets paid, sometimes loudly, with a frigate yanked from every terminal in the game, but it does get paid. Thanks for watching. If you've liked what you've seen, have a crack at that like button and flick us a sub, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Hooroo!